stylistically, Wes Anderson's films may come across as fascistic. All the linear lines, all the classical formalism, and all the strong, powerful men that you often find in the films can be related to a lot of fascistic imagery throughout the 20th century. However, what I do want to argue, perhaps in an obvious manner or in an unobvious manner, is the subversive nature of Wes Anderson's films. Now, when I say subversive, I don't mean it's incredibly clever, so amazing that, oh my god, I never thought of that. I'm just saying it subverts the ideas of the initial presentation of them. Wes Anderson's films, generally, are what we call capers. They're fun romps, often going on adventures, action movies, lots of chases, lots of hijinks and shenanigans going on. But there is a lot to Wes Anderson. Let's talk about the politics of Wes Anderson's films. His films tend to ridicule the institutions of the establishment. So you have like Academia and Rushmore, Family and the Royal Tenenbaums, Landlords and Consumerism within Fantastic Mr. Fox, and I lose count of the amount of authority figures there are in Moonrise Kingdom. There's some fun ideas in there. His portrayals of these powerful men are often as inept, pompous baboons.
Me? Yes, you! Baboon, 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 baboon!
And usually the main characters are in opposition to these. They're nonconformists, they're outsiders, free thinkers, teen rebels, Marxist, wild animals. The golden age of both fascism and Hollywood kind of intersect, growing throughout the early part of the 20th century and then kind of peaking in their golden age around the 40s. It's not a coincidence, or maybe it is. What is a coincidence? It's not a coincidence that the rise of Adolf Hitler strangely intertangles with the rise of Charlie Chaplin, one of the first great comedians to mock fascism. Cinema is a slow-moving art form and quite reactionary, so it can sometimes take a while for it to react to stuff. We can see this in cinema's reaction to fascism. Now, fascism was getting big and massive around the 30s and 40s. There are films that did react to it, but one of the great things that reacted against fascism is a whole movement. The movement of Italian neo-realism that started in the 40s after the fall of Mussolini's government in Italy. It was a reaction and a comment on fascism that, to be honest, hasn't really gone away still today. Okay, here's the thing. Outside of fascist propaganda, fascism isn't really ever portrayed as the good guy. The culture of fascism in the UK shows up in films like Made in Britain and This Is England. Admittedly, it's often portrayed as mixed in with the youth culture of the time, which is usually set in the 70s or 80s, which of course is before I was born, but it's still kind of a big part of British culture. A lot of the ideas of the white nationalist and fascist movements on the right wing of British politics did help support a lot of the ideas that have led to Brexit and its ugly nationalistic side effects. White nationalism, and specifically neo-Nazism, is also seen in the US films of the late 90s and early 2000s, and there are some other examples throughout history, but the two key ones that stick in my mind are American History X and The Believer. Fascism in Europe is more openly portrayed in films by Bertolucci, such as The Conformist, and in Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. Although in Pan's Labyrinth, obviously, it is the context for what is portrayed as fantasy. However, the subtext is written very large. It is very much set in the subtext of the Spanish Civil War. The fascists are the bad guys. Similarly, that can be seen in The Devil's Backbone. Both of these films use monsters and ghosts as kind of euphemisms for the horrors of fascism. We even see it as a more subtle subtext in films like Michael Haneke's The White Ribbon, where it's kind of just like a monster lurking in the background, always there, never fully commented on. And I think, in my opinion, that's the one that I can most directly draw the comparison with Grand Budapest Hotel and its portrayals of fascism. Not seemingly the main point of the film, if you look at it at a very basic plot point, but very obvious in that it is the main theme. The white ribbon, if you just look at it at a basic point, just seems to be about these strange incidents that happen in an Austrian town in the 1910s. What could that be hinting at? What could that be looming towards? I don't know. It's in this context that we find the Grand Budapest Hotel. It's not exactly subtle, the portrayal of fascism in the Grand Budapest Hotel. Now, there are direct comparisons that Grand Budapest Hotel makes with Nazism, and specifically the cinema of Nazi propaganda, especially in the films of Leni Riefenstahl. There can be direct visual comparisons between Triumph of the Will, in particular, with the Grand Budapest Hotel. Not to mention the film's portrayal of the abuse of minorities under the fascist government. Now, obviously, the fascist government at first seems to be a very small plot point in the Grand Budapest Hotel. All victims of the fascists in this film have direct relation to the victims of the Nazi government of Nazi Germany, and of course, historically, are often the victims of fascists and nationalists. The character of Zero obviously representing immigrant characters. We have Gustav, who is portrayed as openly bisexual. Many of the victims in this film are also workers. I think this could be an analogy of the fascist right wings. Abuse and often manipulation of the working class. These characters are often used for the information or used as pawns in order to gain their momentum, gain further power in this film's narrative. The film's portrayal of the victims of the Holocaust can be seen in two examples. We have the character of Kovacs, who is a Jewish lawyer, as well as all of the prisoners in the prison of the film having uniforms very similar to the concentration camp uniforms. That's not to mention, of course, that the film is also dedicated to the author Stefan Zweig. I do apologize if I've mispronounced that name. Zweig was an Austrian Jewish pacifist. His works often focused on humanism and pacifism. In the First World War, he was a pacifist. Of course, before the Second World War, he was forced into exile by the Nazi government. Zweig's works were one of many that was often targeted and destroyed in the infamous Nazi book burnings. What I like about Wes Anderson's portrayal of fascism in this film is it creeps in. It doesn't attack you. It's not directly aggressive. It quietly grows from something that can be ignored. We often ignore the problems in life. We often ignore these things. If they can be ignored, if we can move past them, if we can find a way around it, we're going to ignore the fascists. Wes Anderson's characters do. Wes Anderson's film ignores it. Obviously it doesn't, but in ignoring it, it's making, perhaps accidentally, perhaps on purpose, a very important point about the nature of fascism. It slowly grows. You can't say it was never there. You can't say it suddenly showed up. The fascism that we said just suddenly showed up in 2016, or at least a lot of people didn't just show up. That was there for a while. It's been growing a long time. Arguably, it never went away. The fascism doesn't go away. There is no happy ending. Once we leave the initial narrative, we learn of the decline of the Grand Budapest Hotel. We see the rise of fascism further. Everything slowly deteriorates, arguably as a result of what we ignored initially when it was a small problem. We let this happen. We were distracted by the wealth, by the riches, by the fun of life. And we didn't see this thing This horrible monster growing in the background. Could it have been stopped? I don't know. I don't think the Grand Budapest Hotel gives us an answer. And not all art should do that. I don't think it is the role of art to tell people how to think. However, I do think it is the job of art to ask questions. It opens up the idea. What is the role of art potentially? Is it there simply to ask questions? Does it have the power? Does it have the right to tell someone how to think, how to feel? I'm not going to answer that question. I don't know how to answer that question. In the same way, I don't think the film knows how to answer that question. There is no all-conquering solution to fascism. In one case, the fascism in Italy and in Germany was stamped out. However, the fascists in Spain were able to just die naturally. Pinochet died of natural causes. Many of the worst fascist leaders in history died of natural causes. Fascism doesn't go away. It's been allowed to thrive, it's been allowed to survive. I think this film asks some interesting questions about the rise of fascism. About its supposedly quiet nature.